prisoner my entire life in an attic wasn't quite true. It was only 15 years out of 18, and I was allowed to walk in the gardens for for half hour some days. Besides, the attic rooms of Windermere Manor covered the topmost floor of the entire west wing, and Violet and I had the run of them. Nor did we want for anything. As little girls, we had every doll and toy we could desire. As young women, we had music and books, embroidery and sewing, and an education from the finest tutors. Lord Wade was generous in all things, except, of course, his love and attention towards Vi, his daughter. She tried to pretend that it didn't matter, but I knew better. She couldn't hide her melancholy from me, or her desire to be rid of the affliction that stopped her from taking her place as the eldest of Lord Wade's children in the outside world. I saw it in her watery eyes as she gazed out the window, and the way she hugged herself upon seeing the fresh burns in the oriental rug. The latter only came after one of her episodes. The trinkets and tutors couldn't replace her parents, and in many ways she and I were both orphans, although I, Hannah Smith, was the only true one. As prisons go, the attic of Windermere was pleasant enough, and as the orphan daughter of servants with a strange affliction of her own to endure, I was more fortunate than most in my situation. I read the stories by Mr. Dickens. I knew a child of my class would wind up in the cruel workhouses if they were lucky, and the friendless streets if they were not. I'd been given a roof over my head, food in my belly, an education to rival any lord's daughter, and a dear friend in Vi. ways, I soothed Vi after she almost set the attic on fire, and she soothed me as I fought my way out of the fog of my narcolepsy. Our twin afflictions, seemingly intertwined with one another's, were inexplicable as much as they were dangerous. She apologized. "Stop apologizing to her," I whispered. "You can't help what happened. She knows it." It was an old refrain spoken over and over, but it was one I felt compelled to repeat. Perhaps one day Vi would listen and cease apologizing for something she couldn't control. My neighbor seemed to be moving furniture around upstairs, so I apologized. If you hear that noise, I'm just going to do something real quick here. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. Okay. "Get up, Miss Smith," snapped Miss Levine. "You are not an invalid." She waved a hand at the black scorch mark near the edge of the rug. "Attend to that." "I'll do it," Vi said, rising. She held out her hand and I took it, although I already felt stronger and didn't need her assistance. When I first woke from my strange slumbers, as I called my episodes, I felt vague, like I wasn't altogether there. It was as if I were drifting through a dream, and my head might as well have been stuffed full of cotton. After a few minutes, my head slowly cleared, and I could function normally again. Usually by then, Vi had inadvertently set something alight. She claimed her episodes were brought on by her fear for me in my comatose state, but I'd never quite convinced that was the case. It didn't make sense, although Vi certainly was afraid of me, afraid for me. That I didn't doubt. Poor dear Vi was always afraid. It was why she needed me. "No, I will." I squeezed her hand. "Go and rest on the settee, Lady Violet. Lady Violet, Lady Violet." Her mouth twisted at my teasing. She didn't like me calling her by her full title. "You're too good to me, Hannah." "She's lazy is what she is," Miss Levine wrapped her bony fingers around my arms so tightly I could feel my blood bank up my veins. smoldering. I knew. 3 years ago, after a particularly bad attack, Vi had set the wood-paneled wall behind one of the woolen hangings alight, and the flames had quickly spread. Fortunately, the fire was extinguished before it did too much damage, but only because several pails were kept full of water at all times. Afterward, Lord Wade had ventured up to the attic to inspect the damage. The next day we'd received new hangings. It was the last time Lord Wade had visited us. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vi sink into the settee as if her knees had given way. She turned her pale face to stare out the parlor's only window. While we both loved looking at the scenery through that window and making up stories about the people we saw coming and going from the house, she hated venturing outside for our walks. She seemed especially anxious today. Indeed, her nervousness had grown worse after I'd spotted the handsome gardener watching us. I, on the other hand, had been curious. Poor Vi. She was as much imprisoned by her fears as by her father. I did as I was told and dipped the jug into one of the pails of water lined up between the fireplace and the door. I splashed the water from the jug over the burned patch, getting some of it on the hem of my gray woolen skirt. I checked under the rug, also woolen, but the floorboards had been spared. Wool, it was everywhere. Sometimes I felt like I was drowning in the stuff. Woolen rugs on the floor, woolen hangings on the walls, woolen coverings on the chairs, settees, and beds. My clothes were made of wool, even in the summer, as were Vi's and Miss Levine's. Everything flammable was kept in chests and drawers, all draped in woolen fabric, of course. I was convinced that we were single-handedly responsible for the English wool market's profits. It doesn't burn, you see, not properly. It smolders, then a flame is put to it. When a flame is put to it, but once that flame is extinguished, there is nothing left but a blackened scar. The attic and the two girls had been smothered in wool. Just once I wanted to wear a flimsy organdy gown like the ones worn by Lady Wade and her other daughter. I'd seen them through the window from the room we used as a parlor. The window looked down on the footsteps of Windermere and the long straight avenue lined by ancient oaks that eventually swallowed the drive in the distance. Sometimes I looked through the window at the gentle curve of hills and the thick woods at the edge of the vast Windermere estate, and I wished I was out there, exploring the world, meeting people, tasting freedom. But I couldn't leave Vi behind to live in the attic with only Miss Levine for company, nor could Vi come with me, not with her condition. While my narcolepsy was a danger only to me, her fire starting was a danger to others. She needed my company. Besides, where else could I go? Put on your coats, girls, said Miss Levine, standing at the door. It's cool outside. It'll be all right, I said, taking Vi's hand. She shook her head very slightly in warning. I grinned at her. Vexing Miss Levine was a favorite pastime of mine, since she no longer used her cane to punish us. Vi chewed her lower lip, and the action reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite recall. Something at the edge of my memory, something to do with vexing Miss Levine and the worried look on Vi's face. But the memory slipped away before I could grasp it, and I didn't bother trying to reclaim it. My memories rarely returned after my narcoleptic episodes, and I'd come to accept that they never would. I know you enjoy being tiresome, Miss Smith, our governor said with an exasperated sigh. She was Lady Violet Jameson, daughter of the Earl of Wade. She shouldn't be taking orders from anyone, let alone a governess. Vi, what's wrong? Her blue eyes softened and she bit her lip. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap. You didn't. I tucked the strand of her dark red hair behind her ear as she had done with mine earlier. Where my unruly locks had refused to stay, hers remained. How I admired her sleek hair, her creamy skin, and beautiful face. She would have been the belle of the ball if she'd been allowed to attend one. She was the opposite of me in so many ways. It was short. I was short and small, my face freckled. Although we both had rare hair, mine was pale and orange, whereas hers was a rich mahogany. Miss Levine clapped her hands. Quickly now, before the weather changes. The sky is already looking quite grey in the west. Perhaps we shouldn't go out, said Vi. Miss Levine gripped Vi's arm and gave her such a withering glare that my friend's face crumpled.